It was supposed to be just another late night at the office. Ethan Walker, founder and CEO of Walker Dynamics, stepped into the dimly lit parking lot, his thoughts already on the high-stakes meeting scheduled for the next morning. But the moment he opened the door of his sleek black Mercedes, a sharp, urgent whisper stopped him cold. "Don't speak." "There." Listening. The voice belonged to a small, disheveled black girl, no older than 7, curled up in the back seat with wide, watchful eyes. Her name was Leela. And in the space of a few trembling sentences, she shattered Ethan's perception of his world. She told him she had overheard his longtime partner, Victor Hayes, and his trusted assistant, Claire Donovan, plotting to take everything he had built. Their plan was chilling in its simplicity. Tomorrow's merger would end with Ethan signing documents he'd barely read, documents that would strip him of control and hand the company over to them. Ethan's heart pounded, not just from the betrayal, but from the fact that a child, a stranger, had risked her safety to warn him. How did she even get into his car? She explained she had slipped in when the cleaning crew left the door unlocked, hiding because she knew they were coming for him. That night, in the quiet hum of the city, Ethan realized 2 things. His empire was under attack, and his most unexpected ally was a 7-year-old who refused to look away when she saw someone about to be crushed. Ethan Walker could still feel the weight of Lila's warning long after they'd left the parking lot. Her words played on repeat in his mind, each one tightening the knot in his stomach. "They're planning to take everything from you." For 15 years, Victor Hayes had been his partner in Walker Dynamics, the one man Ethan believed would protect their shared vision as fiercely as he did. And Claire Donovan, his executive assistant of over a decade, had been more than just organized and efficient. She'd been his confidant, the gatekeeper to his entire professional life. The idea that both of them were conspiring to strip him of his company felt like a punch to the gut. But Lila's details left no room for doubt. She had overheard them in a private corner of the Salve office, their voices low but brimming with arrogance. Victor had bragged about the perfect setup, a $400 million merger with a major Japanese conglomerate that would appear legitimate on paper, but behind the scenes, it was a laundering mechanism. Over the past 2 years, they had already siphoned over $5 million from Walker Dynamics through a network of shell companies and fake clients. The merger was designed to make those stolen funds appear as retroactive business expenses, completely legal once Ethan's signature sealed the deal. And after that, Lila had whispered, her voice trembling with the effort of repeating it, "They said you'll have to look for another job." They laughed about it. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, forcing himself to keep his voice calm. "And you're certain about what you heard?" Her eyes bright, defiant despite the dirt smudging her cheeks met his in the rearview mirror. "I'm certain. They called you stupid. They said you trust them so much you won't even read the papers before you sign. And..." She hesitated, lowering her gaze. "My grandma always said kids shouldn't repeat bad words, but they said worse stuff than that." Ethan's pulse hammered in his ears. It wasn't just about losing the company. If Victor and Claire succeeded, years of relationships, client trust, and intellectual property would all fall into their hands along with his reputation. And the most infuriating part? They believed he'd be too naive to suspect a thing. He pulled into an all-night diner, the kind with cracked leather booths and the faint smell of burnt coffee lingering in the air. Lila devoured a hamburger as though she hadn't eaten all day. Ethan sat across from her, pretending to sip his coffee while his mind raced. Every merger detail over the last 3 months had been orchestrated by Victor and Claire. They had handled the contracts, managed the negotiations, and conveniently left Ethan out of anything too technical. The phone on the table buzzed. A message from Victor lit up the screen. "Ready for tomorrow, buddy? The Japanese will love it. You're going to retire rich." Ethan turned the phone toward Lila. She gave a humorless laugh. "He's got some nerve. Smiling at you while he's setting you up." She was right. The arrogance in Victor's words only made the betrayal burn deeper. Moments later, another message arrived, this one from Claire. "I've reviewed all the contracts. Everything's perfect. Trust me as you always have." The gall of it made Ethan's jaw clench. Trust me. The same woman who had access to every password, account number, and confidential document in the company. The same woman who had been at his side for 10 years, now sharpening the knife for his back. Lila wiped her hands on a napkin and studied him. "They know everything about you. But I bet you know things about them too." That stopped him cold. She was right. 15 years of partnership meant he'd seen things. Victor's quiet meetings with competitors. Claire's creative manipulation of the bonus system. Email chains she thought he'd never read. Overheard conversations when they assumed he was out of range. They weren't the only ones with leverage. When you've got nothing, you learn to pay attention to everything, Lila said softly, as though reading his thoughts. Ethan leaned back in the booth, the faintest spark of resolve flickering inside him. You've got a sharp mind, Lila. Her lips curved in a half-smile. Grandma always said you help people who are getting stepped on because next time, it could be you. That single sentence shifted something in him. For weeks, he'd been feeling a creeping helplessness as the merger approached. But now, for the first time, he felt something else. Clarity. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a number he hadn't dialed in over a year. Gabriel Ortiz. Former police investigator turned corporate security consultant. Ethan had hired him once to vet a major client. But 6 months ago, Victor and Claire had abruptly terminated Gabriel's contract, citing budget cuts. When Gabriel picked up, his voice was wary. Ethan. Didn't think I'd hear from you again. I didn't fire you, Gabe. They did. And now I know why. They've been running a con right under my nose. 2 hours later, Gabriel sat in Ethan's kitchen, flipping through files on his tablet. You were right to call me. I've been looking into them on my own. They're not just planning to steal your company, they're running an organized fraud ring. I've traced at least $5.3 million, moved through bogus accounts. And the merger? It's a front. The Japanese deal is just to clean their books and erase the trail. Ethan's fingers curled into fists. The air felt heavier with each word Gabriel spoke. They need you to sign tomorrow so every dirty transfer looks legitimate. Once you do, you're out, and they walk away clean, Gabriel finished. Lila was perched on a stool, listening intently. So don't sign. Let them think you will, then catch them in the act. Gabriel nodded approvingly. She's got it. If we collect enough evidence tonight, we can bring in law enforcement during the meeting. They'll be caught red-handed. Ethan's mind worked quickly, weighing the risk. We'll need recordings, documents, a paper trail that's bulletproof in court. I can get it, Gabriel said. But we'll need eyes inside. Someone they won't suspect. Lila's voice was immediate. I can do it. I can go back there and listen. Ethan hesitated. She was just a child. But she'd already shown more courage in one night than most adults he knew. Only if Gabriel stays close to you every second. Gabriel gave a short nod. I'll watch her like a hawk. As the plan took shape, Ethan realized the irony. Victor and Claire had spent 2 years constructing the perfect trap. But in less than 24 hours, with the help of an ex-cop and a fearless 7-year-old, he would turn it into their undoing. By the time midnight rolled around, they had assembled a damning dossier: bank records, voice recordings, falsified invoices. All that remained was to walk into the conference room the next day and let Victor and Claire believe the game was theirs. Right until the moment it all collapsed on their heads. For the first time since Lila's whisper in the parking lot, Ethan felt ready, not just to defend his company, but to show his betrayers that the man they thought was blind had been watching all along. The moment Ethan Walker agreed to fight back, the air in the room shifted. No longer was he the passive target of Victor Hayes and Claire Donovan's scheme. He was now the hunter, biding his time. Sitting at his kitchen table in the soft glow of the overhead light, Ethan laid it out plainly. They would need undeniable proof. Not speculation, not hearsay, evidence so concrete that no lawyer could twist it into an escape. Gabriel Ortiz, leaning back in his chair with the practiced calm of a man who'd spent decades reading people under pressure, nodded. We have the advantage of surprise, he said. They believe you'll walk into that boardroom tomorrow, sign the documents, and hand them the keys. They don't know you're already moving against them. Lila, perched on the edge of the couch, looked between them with a mix of excitement and determination. I can help, she said. I know how to listen without being seen. I've done it before. Ethan frowned. You're just a kid. This isn't a game. If they suspect you, they won't, Lila cut in. They don't even know I exist. And I can get closer than anyone else because no one notices a kid. Her voice was steady, with the kind of conviction that didn't come from recklessness, but from surviving in a world that ignored her. Gabriel considered her, then looked back at Ethan. She's right. Kids are invisible in corporate spaces. If she can get into the building without being spotted, she could record their final preparations. Ethan still hesitated. The thought of putting Lila in the same building as the two people plotting his downfall sent a cold knot into his stomach. But time was short, and their window of opportunity was narrow. "If we do this," he said, "you'll be with Gabriel at all times. No exceptions." Lila grinned. "Deal." The plan took shape quickly. Gabriel would retrieve a concealed recording device from his office, small enough to fit inside a child's jacket. Lila's job would be to wander the upper floors casually, pretending to look for a restroom or exploring the vending machines, all while the device captured every word. Gabriel, disguised as a courier, would shadow her closely, without drawing attention. While Gabriel was gone to gather equipment, Ethan began pulling up old digital files from his private archive, things he had quietly collected over the years, without even realizing their future value. Copies of contracts Victor had signed with suspiciously short-lived clients. Internal memos from Claire authorizing bonus payments that never went through payroll. Even photographs from corporate retreats where Victor had slipped away to meet with competitors. When Gabriel returned, he brought more than just the recorder. He had a stack of printed bank records, fresh from a contact in financial crimes who owed him a favor. "These," he said, fanning them out on the table, "show a pattern of deposits into offshore accounts controlled by shell companies, all tied back to Victor and Claire. If we can catch them talking about these accounts, we'll have the missing link." Lila leaned over the papers, studying them with surprising focus. "They'll talk about it," she said. "People like that can't help bragging when they think they've already won." Early the next morning, Gabriel and Lila slipped into Walker Dynamics through the service entrance used by vendors and maintenance staff. Lila wore an oversized hoodie and carried a half-empty snack bag to complete the look of a child tagging, along with a parent at work. Gabriel's courier uniform gave him an easy cover. No one looked twice at a man hauling packages. They started on the 8th floor, one level below the executive suites. Gabriel knew from years of security work that sound often traveled through shared ventilation shafts. Sure enough, faint voices drifted down as they moved quietly through the corridor. "Just make sure he doesn't read anything," Claire was saying. Her tone clipped and confident. "I've highlighted the signature lines in yellow. All he has to do is smile and sign." Victor chuckled. "He will. He's so predictable. 15 years and I still can't believe how easy it's been. Once those contracts are in place, the Japanese will wire the final payment directly into our channels. Clean as a whistle." Lila glanced up at Gabriel, who gave a subtle nod toward the vent. She positioned herself near it, pretending to tie her shoelace, the recorder angled toward the sound. "5 million already cleared," Claire went on. "After tomorrow, we'll be untouchable. And Walker?" Her voice turned mocking. "He'll be standing there wondering what happened, while we're already on a beach somewhere." Gabriel mouthed. "Got it," to Lila. They moved on, catching fragments of further conversation. Victor reminding Claire to destroy certain backups. Claire bragging about how she had convinced Ethan to trust her like a loyal puppy. Each word was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. By midday, they had over an hour of incriminating audio. Lila had even managed to catch Victor taking a call from an unknown overseas contact, discussing the final wash of funds through the Japanese merger. Gabriel immediately copied the files to 2 encrypted drives, one for law enforcement, one for Ethan's personal archive. When they returned to Ethan's home, he listened to the recordings in silence. The casual malice in their voices was worse than he'd imagined. He heard Victor laugh about 15 years, pretending to be friends with that idiot, and Claire's chilling remark. The day after. "Tomorrow, he'll be nothing." Lila sat across from him, her legs swinging off the chair, watching his reaction. "Now you can stop them," she said simply. Ethan looked up from the recorder, meeting her gaze. "Yes. Now I can stop them." His voice carried a new steadiness, the kind born from knowing the truth and having the tools to act. Gabriel spread out the evidence on the dining table: bank statements, shell company registrations, falsified contracts, and now, damning audio recordings. "This is enough to bring in the Federal Financial Crimes Unit," he said. "If we walk into that meeting tomorrow with this, we can have them arrested on the spot." Ethan's mind raced ahead to the logistics. They'd need to coordinate with law enforcement to ensure the timing was perfect right after Victor and Claire presented the contracts. But before they could leave the building, he wanted them caught not just in legal terms, but in the steep moment, surrounded by the very people they had deceived. As the afternoon faded into evening, the three of them went over the plan again and again. Lila, still buzzing from the day's success, insisted on knowing every detail. Gabrielle assigned her one final role, staying just outside the conference room during the merger meeting, ready to step in if needed with her original eyewitness account. Ethan finally allowed himself a small smile. "They've spent 2 years digging this hole," he said. "Tomorrow, we just help them fall into it." That night, as Lila curled up on the couch under a warm blanket, Ethan stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He thought about how, less than 24 hours ago, he'd been ready to walk into that meeting blind. And now, thanks to a fearless child and a relentless investigator, he held all the cards. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about saving Walker Dynamics. It would be about reclaiming the power Victor and Claire had tried to strip from him, and showing them that the man they thought was an easy mark was, in fact, the one orchestrating their downfall. And when the clock struck 2, he would be ready. At precisely 2 p.m., Ethan Walker stepped into the top-floor conference room of Walker Dynamics with the calm, measured pace of a man walking into just another business meeting. The vast windows flooded the space with afternoon light, casting long shadows across the polished table. Victor Hayes and Claire Donovan were already there, their smiles wide, their movements sharp and confident as they arranged neat stacks of contracts. "Ethan," Victor greeted warmly, crossing the room to clasp his hand with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Glad you could make it. The Japanese delegation is just a few minutes away. Everything's ready for the big moment." Claire approached next, a leather briefcase in hand, her eyes shining with the kind of rehearsed warmth she'd perfected over years of deception. "Boss," she said smoothly, "all you have to do is sign where I've marked the yellow tabs. I've handled every detail, trust me, as always." Ethan returned her smile, but his eyes were unreadable. "Of course, Claire," he said evenly. "But before we start, I have something interesting to share." The air shifted almost imperceptibly. From the doorway, Gabriel Ortiz entered, carrying a box of files. Behind him came 2 federal financial crimes investigators, their badges discreet but unmistakable. Victor's smile faltered for the briefest second before sliding back into place. Claire's fingers tightened, slightly on the edge of the briefcase. "Gabriel," Victor said with feigned surprise. "Didn't think we'd be seeing you again." "What's this about?" "I work for the real owner of this company now," Gabriel replied evenly, setting the box on the table. "And I've brought along some people very interested in your financial creativity." Ethan moved to the head of the table, connecting his laptop to the projector. The screen lit up with a spreadsheet, each line a damning record of bank transfers, shell companies, and offshore accounts. "Do you recognize these transactions?" he asked, his tone almost conversational. Victor forced a chuckle. "Looks like some routine business operations to me." "Routine?" Ethan advanced the slide. Photographs appeared. Victor entering and leaving a FI citation, private bank in the Cayman Islands. Claire meeting a known financial intermediary linked to multiple laundering cases. Another click brought up signed contracts with non-existent clients. "You created 17 shell companies," Ethan said, his voice sharpening, "to launder over $5.3 million stolen from Walker Dynamics. And the merger with the Japanese? Nothing more than a way to clean the books and erase the trail." Claire's composure cracked. "Ethan, this is absurd. Those documents could be anything." Gabriel interrupted, sliding sealed envelopes across the table toward the investigators. "These contain recordings of your conversations planning the fraud. And sworn statements from 3 out of your phantom clients, all ready to testify." Victor's face darkened. "You can't prove any of this. It's just a setup." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice low and cutting. "Victor, I didn't set you up. You spent 2 years digging your own grave. I just handed you the shovel." At that moment, the conference room door opened again. A small figure stepped inside, accompanied by a social worker. Lila. Her eyes were steady, her voice clear. "Hi, Mr. Hayes," she said. "Remember me? I was hiding under your desk when you told Mr. Nakamura you were going to steal Ethan's company." The room went still. Victor opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Claire tried one last desperate move, her voice rising. "You're going to take the word of a street kid over 2 respected executives?" Gabriel reached into his pocket, pressing play on a recording. Claire's own voice filled the room, dripping with disdain. Ethan's a sentimental fool. The day after tomorrow, he'll be looking for another job, and we'll have everything. Victor's voice followed, equally damning. 15 years pretending to be friends with that idiot. Worth every second to see his face when he realizes he's lost it all. Claire's face went pale, Victor's jaw clenched. One of the investigators stepped forward. Victor Hayes, Claire Donovan, you are under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. The metallic click of handcuffs punctuated the words. Victor glared at Ethan. This won't stand. I'll destroy you. Ethan straightened his tie, his voice calm and steady. You already tried, Victor. The difference is, I'm better at this than you are. Claire said nothing as she was escorted out, her eyes downcast, her carefully constructed persona in ruins. As the door closed behind them, the room seemed lighter. Gabriel closed his briefcase with deliberate care. The Japanese delegation canceled their visit the moment they heard about the Tonnet investigation, he said. But 3 other companies have already called, interested in legitimate partnerships. Ethan exhaled slowly, a wave of relief mingling with the adrenaline still coursing through him. For 15 years, he had trusted Victor implicitly. For 10, he had treated Claire like family. Both had used that trust as a weapon. Today, they'd learned that patience and kindness, when paired with strategy, could be far more dangerous than malice. Lila stepped closer, looking up at him. They're really going to jail? Yes, Lila, Ethan said. For a long time. She nodded, satisfied. Good. Then you can get back to building the company without people like them. Ethan smiled for the first time that day, not the polite mask of business, but something real. Exactly. He looked out the window at the skyline, the city spread out before him. The boardroom that Police Statter had been meant to witness his downfall had instead become the stage for his victory. The people who had underestimated him were now in custody, and the company he'd built from sex. The ground up was safe stronger, even because of it. And it had all started with a whispered warning from a child no one else had noticed. The weeks following the dramatic takedown of Victor Hayes and Claire Donovan passed in a blur of meetings, legal proceedings, and cautious rebuilding. Walker Dynamics was free of its parasites, but Ethan Walker knew that trust, both within the company and in himself, would take time to restore. Gabriel Ortiz had taken on a formal role as head of corporate integrity, overseeing internal audits, and ensuring no such scheme could ever take root again. The staff, initially stunned by the arrests, gradually began to rally, their loyalty cemented by Ethan's refusal to sweep the day scandal under the rug. And through it all, Lila was never far from his side. At first, she stayed in the guest room of his apartment, her few possessions neatly folded into a single backpack. She attended school during the day. Ethan had enrolled her in a private academy within a week, and in the evenings, she'd often sit in his office, doing homework, while he pored over contracts. It was during one of those quiet evenings, the hum of the city beyond the windows, that Ethan decided to follow a nagging curiosity. Something about Lila's last name had lingered in his mind since that first night. He remembered her mentioning her grandmother, Josephine Miller. That name Miller had been part of his own family history. Late one night, after Lila had gone to bed, Ethan dug into the family archives stored on a dusty hard drive. He cross-referenced birth certificates, marriage records, and old photographs. Slowly, a thread began to weave itself through decades of separation. Josephine Miller was his cousin, his father's brother's daughter. The two sides of the family had lost touch over 30 years ago after a bitter inheritance dispute. Josephine had moved to another state, raising her family in near poverty, while Ethan's side had built a business empire. He had never met her, and yet her name was there in black and white, tied irrevocably to his own. The discovery hit him with unexpected force. Lila wasn't just the brave stranger who had saved his company. She was family. He waited a week, wanting to be absolutely certain. Gabriel, intrigued by the coincidence, used his investigative network to verify the records. When the report came back, there was no doubt. Lila was Josephine's granddaughter. One evening, as the winter wind rattled against the apartment windows, Ethan called Lila into his study. She came in, wearing her school uniform, her hair neatly braided, holding a math workbook. Lila, he began, gesturing for her to sit. I've been looking into something about your family. She tilted her head, curious. What about them? You told me your grandmother's name was Josephine Miller, Ethan said softly. Her eyes lit up. Yeah. She raised me until she couldn't anymore. Ethan slid a folder across the desk. Josephine was my cousin. That means. He paused, letting the words sink in. That means we're related. You're my family. For a moment, Lila simply stared at him. Then her small hands opened the folder, flipping through the documents, birth certificates, faded photographs, genealogical charts. She looked back up, her eyes wide. Really? She whispered. Really, Ethan confirmed. Your grandmother and I didn't know each other well, but I think she'd be proud of what you did. You didn't just save my company, Lila. You saved family. She blinked rapidly, and for a moment Ethan thought she might cry. Instead, she stood and walked around the desk, wrapping her arms tightly around him. Grandma always said family takes care of family. I just didn't know you were mine. Gabriel, standing quietly in the doorway, cleared his throat. Seems your instincts were sharper than any of us knew. Over the next few months, Ethan began the legal process to adopt Lila. The paperwork was daunting: state regulations, background checks, court dates, but he was determined. Lila, for her part, adapted quickly to her new life. She excelled at school, joining the debate team, and making friends easily. Though she still had a guarded streak that only softened when she was with Ethan. The adoption hearing took place in the same courthouse where Victor and Claire had been convicted. The symmetry wasn't lost on Ethan. In the very place where his trust had been betrayed, he would now formalize the bond with the person who had restored his faith. On the day of the hearing, Lila wore a pale blue dress with a ribbon at the waist. She clutched Ethan's hand as they stood before the judge. Gabriel sat in the back row, watching with a rare, unguarded smile. The judge flipped through the file, then looked over the bench at them. It's not every day I see a case that begins with corporate crime and ends with a family reunion, she said. Mr. Walker, do you understand the responsibilities of legal parenthood? I do, Ethan replied firmly. And Lila, do you want Mr. Walker to be your legal father? Lila squeezed his hand. Yes. More than anything. The judge's gavel came down with a decisive tap. Then I declare this adoption finalized. Congratulations. You are now father and daughter. A cheer went up from the few employees and friends Ethan had invited. Lila turned to him, grinning. Dad. She said for the first time, testing the word. It fit. Afterward, they celebrated at a small restaurant. Between bites of cake, Lila grew thoughtful. Do you think Grandma knew this would happen? That I'd end up with you? Ethan smiled faintly. I think she knew you were strong enough to find your way to where you belonged. And I think she'd be proud of the courage you showed. The months that followed brought more changes. Walker Dynamics entered a period of unprecedented growth, securing partnerships with companies that valued transparency and integrity. Ethan launched the Miller Walker Scholarship Fund, dedicated to providing education and housing for children in vulnerable situations, just as Lila had been. Lila took a special role in the program, helping choose scholarship recipients and mentoring younger kids. If I could find one scared kid who thinks no one cares, she told Ethan, and show them they matter, that'd be worth everything. 5 years later, the scholarship fund supported over 200 children annually. Lila, now 12, stood at the podium during the anniversary gala, her voice clear and confident. The best day of my life, she told the audience, was the day I got into my dad's car. Because that day, I wasn't just saving a company. I was saving my family. Ethan, listening from the front table, felt a deep, steady pride. Victor and Claire had tried to destroy everything he'd built, but in doing so, they'd set in motion the events that brought him his greatest gift. It was a reminder that sometimes the universe delivers the people we need most in the most unexpected ways. And that family isn't always the one you start with, it's the one you choose, and the one that chooses you back. The sentencing of Victor Hayes and Claire Donovan marked the final chapter of their long, calculated betrayal. In a crowded courtroom, the judge's words fell like iron. 12 years in federal prison for Victor, 8 years for Claire. Both were ordered to forfeit all remaining assets to help repay Walker Dynamics and other victims uncovered during the investigation. Ethan Walker sat quietly as the gavel struck, feeling neither triumph nor pity. There was only a sense of closure, the door closing on a chapter that had nearly cost him everything. The investigation had revealed an even broader network of deceit. 7 other business owners defrauded over the last 5 years, all now in the process of reclaiming their losses. With Victor and Claire gone, Walker Dynamics entered a period of transformation. Free from the financial drain and ethical rot, the company saw a 40% growth surge within 2 years. Ethan restructured the leadership team, placing integrity at the core of every decision. Gabriel Ortiz was appointed to lead the newly formed Corporate Integrity Division, ensuring that transparency and accountability became permanent fixtures of the company's culture. But for Ethan, rebuilding his business was only part of the story. The other part, perhaps the more important one, was Lila. Officially adopted and now thriving in her new life, she brought a different kind of purpose to his days. Watching her excel in school and grow into a confident young leader reminded him daily why he had fought so hard to turn the tide. Inspired by Lila's journey, Ethan launched the Walker Miller Scholarship Fund, named in honor of both their family names. The fund provided housing, education, and mentorship for children in vulnerable situations. Kids who, like Lila, had been overlooked by the world but possessed extraordinary potential. Lila didn't just lend her name to the project, she embraced it fully. At 10 years old, she became the fund's honorary president, reviewing applications and helping select scholarship recipients. Her keen instincts and ability to see beyond grades or formal achievements impressed even the most seasoned staff members. Sometimes, she told the selection committee, you can tell who's going to change the world just by how they look at it. Under her guidance, the fund expanded rapidly, partnering with schools, community centers, and nonprofit organizations across the country. In its first year, it supported 30 children. By the third, that number had grown to over 200. Ethan often marveled at the way Lila carried herself, still the same sharp-eyed girl who had slipped into his car to deliver a warning, yet now equipped with the tools and confidence to shape her own future. At public events, she spoke with poise beyond her years, telling her story, not as a tale of victimhood, but as a testament to what courage and opportunity could achieve together. I used to think no one saw me, she said at one gala, her voice carrying through the hall. But the truth is, sometimes you just have to keep going until the right person does. And when they do, everything can change. For Ethan, those words summed up the journey they had shared. Victor and Claire had intended to strip him of his legacy, but their scheme had backfired spectacularly. In their place, he had found not only renewed control of his company but also a daughter, a cause, and a purpose far greater than profit margins or quarterly growth. Looking out over the city skyline from his office one evening, Ethan realized the true measure of his victory. It wasn't the booming numbers on the company's balance sheet or the high-profile partnerships now lining up to work with Walker Dynamics. It was the quiet knowledge that the worst betrayal of his life had led him to the greatest gift he could have received: family, a mission, and the chance to change countless other lives for the better. In the end, Victor Hayes and Claire Donovan's betrayal did far more than fail. It opened the door to everything Ethan Walker never knew he needed. They had plotted to strip him of his company, his reputation, and his future. Instead, their scheme led him to Lila, a brave, sharp-eyed girl who not only saved his life's work but also became his daughter. In losing his trust in the wrong people, Ethan found the right person to trust forever. Through rebuilding his company and creating the Walker Miller Scholarship Fund, Ethan discovered that true victory isn't measured by how thoroughly you destroy your enemies. It's measured by what you build in their wake, legacies of kindness, integrity, and opportunity that outlast every act of malice. The betrayal that should have broken him became the catalyst for his greatest chapter yet. Sometimes life's cruelest turns are simply the universe's way of redirecting you toward your real purpose. The people who betray you may think they've taken everything, but often, they've cleared the space for something greater to grow. The best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's living a life so full of meaning that their actions become irrelevant. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a setback that turned into a blessing? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of justice, redemption, and hope. Your next inspiration might just be one click away.